Hello my quilting friends, Leah Day here with a new video for the machine quilting block party. Today we're going to learn how to piece a square in the sun block together. So let's get started first piecing our square in a square block. You're going to get started with your fabric B squares. We're going to cut them in half diagonally. So just set up your ruler right over it and slice those squares in half. And you can see how we're going to piece this on all around that fabric C square in the center. I'll line this up. Carefully cut across. Okay. So to line this up, we have cut this just a little bit big. These pieces are just a bit big. And the easiest thing that I found is to fold it in half and create a little crease line right at the top. And do the same thing with your triangle. Very gently fold it in half and press a little crease line with your fingertips. And then you can line it up just exactly right, take it to your machine and stitch right across 1/4 inch seam allowance and go on ahead and stitch the triangles to the top and bottom exactly that way. So I have my pen placed and I'm just smoothing out the triangle over the square, making sure everything's in nice alignment. I'll slide it underneath my foot and start stitching. And I think it's important to pin in this situation because it lines everything up really nice and even. You're gonna have this triangle overhang slightly on both sides. You want it to line up right in the middle of that square. So stitch all the way down and then just repeat the exact same process on the opposite side. So even before I press those triangles open and those seams open, I'm going to go on ahead and trim up these little triangles on the edges. I'm just lining up my ruler really carefully and I'll lop off those little triangles. Be careful not to cut the fabric C square, just cut off the extra fabric, that fabric B, these little schniblets. And then of course, take those pieces, finger press them open nicely, and then press with a hot, dry iron. So the final step to our square in a square block, I'm going to fold it in half. Again, just lining up those two seam lines and do a little finger crease right in the middle. Do the exact same thing to your triangle. Fold it in half, give it a little finger crease, and then line up those two creases so that they're exactly in alignment. Pin it in place. And now let's take it to the machine and stitch through it one more time. We're going to go on ahead and attach this side and our square in a square unit will be complete. So I'm going to slide this under the foot the exact same way we stitched the first set, making sure everything's nice and smooth from the edge of the triangle down to the pin. And just making sure that the edges stay nicely stacked on top of one another and in alignment with the edge of that patchwork foot. And one thing that's really important because we're pressing all of these seam allowances open is to lower your stitch length to 1.5, or in this case my machine only goes down to 1.4. It doesn't hit 1.5 for some reason, so that's the setting that I select. So I produce a nice tight stitch so I can press those seam allowances open. And I always stitch through these scraps just because it gets my foot up to the right height and it keeps those thread tails from making a big mess and wasting a lot of my bobbin thread whenever you pull out those long thread tails. You know, it stops you from accidentally getting everything sucked down in the machine too. So it's really helpful just to stitch through a little scrap, get started, and you can see how quickly this flows straight from one side and into the other, piecing these triangles on really quickly. So really, the square in a square unit might be something that you might want to cut out a lot of these and make a whole quilt with them. I think it'd be really cool. So here's our square in a square block, and of course we've got to press these seam allowances open from the back, so just really gently open that seam. You can see I like to run my fingernail across it just so it's nice and open and flat. And then we're going to press it flat, permanently flat, with a hot, dry iron. And I really like to finger press rather than trying to dig the seam open with the tip of an iron. That really doesn't get it as flat And it can also kind of create some shiny marks, some scorch marks slightly on your fabric. So always finger press first and then hit it with an iron. Now you've got your block together, just refer to your pattern. You're going to trim this up, making sure to align your ruler with these points to make sure this is trimmed up nice and square. So trim this up according to the instructions of your pattern, and that unit will be complete. So the next step is to make some half square triangles. And we're going to be working with some more fabric C squares, and you're just going to draw a diagonal line from corner to corner and stack up those squares with a fabric D square. So we've got a fabric C and a fabric D square. Create two stacks, take them to the machine, and we're going to stitch exactly 1/4 of an inch to both sides of that marked diagonal line. So I'm going to slide the stack of squares under my foot right up against the needle and aligning that marked line with the edge of my foot. And I'm making sure that these squares are stacked really nicely on top of one another with all the edges aligned. And now I'm just going to stitch straight on down, just keeping the edge of my foot right in line with that marked line down the center. Okay, we've got 2 of these, so you can just chain piece them back to back. So that means is just stop with your needle in the down position, maybe take 1 or 2 stitches off of the piece before, and then you're going to slide the next set of pieces right up against the needle. So the next stitch you take is going to be onto the next stack of squares. And again, you want to make sure that everything's nicely aligned, the edges are in alignment, and that you're stitching right along the middle of that marked line in the center. Once you get one side stitched, you're going to slide it right back under the foot, rotate it around, and we're going to stitch 1/4 inch to the opposite side of that line. You can do it once, so you can definitely do it again. So just stitch on down, and your half square triangles will be complete. So take your half square triangles and cut them apart right along that diagonal line in the center. And again, you're going to finger press the seam allowance open. First press it with your finger, then hit it with a hot dry iron, and then again refer to your quilt pattern to know the size to trim these half square triangles down to, so you'll be ready to move to the next step. So the next step is to start working on our flying geese. And for this, you're going to want to prep up some fabric A squares and again mark a diagonal line from corner to corner. So now you're going to take your prepped up fabric A squares and you're going to lay it on top of a fabric D rectangle. And you're going to stitch right on that marked line. We're not stitching away from it this time, we're stitching right on the line. Okay, so once you stitch that seam, you're just going to fold over that top triangle, give it a good finger press, a nice press with your iron. Now we have a little bit of extra fabric here. We want to leave the background rectangle, this fabric D rectangle, because that's going to give us a nice base for our flying geese unit. But we don't need this little flap of fabric A. So I'm going to trim that away carefully. And I'm trimming this away roughly 1/4 of an inch away from the stitching line. Okay, so fold that back down. So give that a quick press, nice and flat. And now I'll layer on another square. We'll take this to the machine and stitch right on that diagonal line. So I've lined up my square with the corner of the flying geese unit, and I'm just stitching right on top of that marked line. And I do like to start in the center of the unit and work my way to the corner, simply because for some reason I find when I start right on the corner, the whole thing tends to get kind of sucked down inside of my machine. I'm not sure if that's just me or maybe my needle, I don't really know, but I find that it really works out better when I start in the middle and stitch down to the corner just like this. Just like before, we're going to fold down that triangle, give it a good finger crease, run your fingernails across it, and then hit it with a hot dry iron. Okay, and then trim away that little bit of extra fabric so it looks like this. And your flying geese unit will be complete. So create 4 of these, and then we'll be ready to lay out our block and piece it all together. So next you'll start laying out the block with a square and a square block in the center, and then your flying geese units all around. And you want to make sure that you have the fabric D triangle pointing out, so you almost get a second square effect in this cute block. We're going to finish up with our half square triangles in each of the corners, and our square and a sun block will be complete. Just piece this together, working in rows, and then piece those rows together, making sure to match your seam allowances, add the borders, and here's what it looks like whenever you finish your square and a sun block. So that's it for this block. I really hope that you enjoyed learning how to piece this square and a sun block and all of these fun units. You can find the pattern for this block right here at leahday.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our videos so you don't miss out on the quilting video coming out next week. Until next time, let's go quilt.
Subscribe to Mom's videos so you can learn how to quilt this block. Whee!
Perfect. You're awesome.